This is Toby Eunice from A Gypsy's Kiss with your weekly podcast for Monday, January 13th, 2014. Our guest today is Dale Neitzel, a thrill-of-the-chase treasure hunter from Washington State. Dale, welcome to the podcast. We're very happy you could join us today.
Oh, I'm glad to be here. Thank you for asking me.
It was my pleasure. I do have a list of questions that I'm going to ask you, and you've already seen that list, but I hope I'm not surprising you with this one. Yesterday, as a lot of the searchers heard as they were viewing the live stream event from the Collected Works bookstore, they heard me correct Allie McGraw in the pronunciation of your name, and that was based on your correction of my pronunciation. I want you to tell me what the correct pronunciation is and how it got so messed up.
I have a very difficult name to pronounce. I don't think I even pronounce it correctly, but generally, I know it's difficult to pronounce, so I don't correct people. I mean, I feel, I'm happy they're calling me usually, unless it's the IRS. I'm glad to have them give me a shout. So I don't generally correct people. So my name ends up getting spread around in different ways, however somebody pronounced it. And Forrest, I think, early on, he started calling me Neitzel or Neitzel.
Yeah.
And I just never corrected him. I'm just so used to it. I don't even think about it really. And then the other day I heard you pronounce my name, and I said, well, this is going to go out for everybody. Maybe now's a chance to let them know how my name is really pronounced. So I thought I would correct you, and now here I am explaining how my name is really pronounced.
Hopefully enough people will hear this to know that from now on, the correct pronunciation of your name is Dale Neitzel.
That's right. That's it. You got it. But it was a lot of fun listening to Allie McGraw say my name 16 times. I may use that as a boosting point here in my career.
All right, let's get on to our questions. So everybody knows who you are, but not a lot of people know all of the backstory. So tell us your backstory. How did you end up becoming one of the searchers looking for Forrest's hidden treasure? And most importantly, tell us a little bit about your special relationship with Forrest.
I guess I've been what people would call a treasure hunter for a long time. And my career, as it is in treasure hunting, started with Forrest's nephew, a fellow by the name of Forrest Fenn. And Creighton and I get along swimmingly. We're pretty good buddies. We've been good friends for quite a while. And we ended up going all over the world, really, looking for treasure together. Creighton is a world-class diver and a sonar expert. We would spend months in Uruguay looking for Spanish galleons, Portuguese galleons, or Old English freighters. We had an area out there. And when you're out someplace with a team, and you're the only folks who speak English, you tend to kind of stick together in the evenings and tell stories and entertain one another. And Creighton used to tell stories about his uncle Forrest, and we would all be highly entertained with Forrest's story, how he made his millions and the kind of funny things he was into, and we would hear about his pueblo out in San Lazaro. And of course, Creighton spent a lot of time with his uncle and was quite familiar with his wicked ways. So we would all be entertained by him, and I didn't think a lot about it. But when I would come back home every once in a while, I'd check out and see what Forrest was up to. I'd check him out on the internet and look him up, see if he was appearing in the newspaper in Santa Fe. And I think I checked him out near the end of the summer of 2010. And there was his name and a new book that he had out called The Thrill of the Chase. And I think it was that story by Margie Goldsmith, that first story that she did, where he announced that he was hiding a treasure. And I thought, well, this is going to be a lot of fun. And so that's how I got involved in the whole thing. It was all really through hearing wild stories about Forrest and his life from his nephew, who lives in Seattle, Washington.
When you first started the search, what did you envision, and how has that vision changed?
I envisioned that I would find the treasure and I would be able to finish the new bathroom on my house. That was really all I was after. but it turned into being so much fun. And I'm like a lot of people. You hear this a lot, or you read this a lot on various blogs and forums on the internet, that folks who go after the treasure, they don't really believe they're going to find it. They don't have a lot of faith in their ability to find it, and I think I'm pretty much the same way. What I'm into now, and that's because I've been looking for 3 years and I haven't found it. So instead, what it's come down to is, this is just a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun for a variety of reasons for me. First of all, I live on an island out in Puget Sound, northern Puget Sound, out in the Salish Sea. So I live a kind of an isolated life, and for me, the community of searchers is a lot of fun. I really enjoy them. I enjoy reading what they have to say. I enjoy exchanging notes and ideas with them. I just enjoy being with them in that way. To me, that's a lot of fun. It's not unlike when we were out treasure hunting with Creighton and the team, and we would spend days and days and days together in a very confined area looking for something. There's a lot of camaraderie. There's a lot of teamwork. There's also, folks who get dispirited and need to be cheered up. It's a community, and everyone is there. And by and large, there are people who are cheerleaders. There are people who support the other folks there. There are people who need support. There are people who want to share their ideas. There are people who want to be secretive, and it's all fun. It's all enjoyable. And I just like that, and that's what it's evolved into for me.
I see a lot of that community building on your blog at DaleNeitzel.com, and I think everyone in the community thinks of you as kind of the cheerleader in chief, for lack of a better way to describe it. Although the vision that just came into my head is going to take a while to get out. So, but thank you for all your effort at building that community. So
it's a lot of fun.
It is. What do you think about Forrest and what he's done with The Thrill of the Chase?
Forrest is one of the most generous and creative people I have ever met in my life. Usually you meet people who are one or the other, and for some reason, Forrest is able to do both at the same time. And that's quite unusual, to be both creative as he is. I mean, the man's brain never stops working. I think I asked him that last night. I sent him an email after the drawing was over, and I said, I'm just amazed, because he was already flying off. Well, let's see, what are we going to do next? And I was thinking, doesn't your brain, I said, Forrest, doesn't your brain ever stop working? And does this ever get you in trouble? And he sent me a note back. He said, it never gets me in trouble, but it embarrasses me a lot. I think it's true. Forrest's brain really just never stops working. He never stops being creative. He's always working on something, and I'm sure that's why he's so successful. I mean, while the rest of us sit back, put our feet up, and watch a basketball game on the TV, I don't know that Forrest does a lot of that. I think he's just, if he does that, the basketball game is just background while he's really thinking about what his next scheme or adventure or plan is going to be.
I don't know him as well as you do, but what I have seen of the man indicates to me that he's the kind of person that not only lives his life to the fullest, but will live his life to the fullest as long as he's possibly capable of it. So
I was just saying, I think Forrest is a lot of fun to be around for that reason. He's got a tremendous amount of energy. He has a tremendous amount of creativity. I mean, you saw what he did there at the drawing. I mean, who would have ever thought that in addition to, this jar and all of the goodies that he decided to put into it, I mean, okay, as if the bronze jar wasn't enough, somewhere along in the middle of that collecting funds for the raffle itself and selling tickets, he decided to put a bunch of stuff into it. And I mean, he really did up the ante. It was like a poker game. I mean, at that point, there was much more interest, and I thought it was interesting. And then when we show up for the raffle, he's got this beautiful necklace, handmade necklace for Allie. I mean, the guy, he just never stops thinking about ways to make things richer and more interesting. Forrest has all of these stories and he knows all of this, but for some reason, I mean, he'll share it if you force him to, but oftentimes if you ask him, he just walks around it. He won't tell you exactly what he knows, and I think it's because he thinks it's only interesting to him. I mean, on some level, he wants people to know, but on another level, he thinks it's time to move on and get away from this. And so he has this wonderful story about this, filling you in about this rabbit and this Anasazi folks who were eating it, but he thinks, who's going to care about that? And so let's get on with this and let's move on to the next thing. When in fact, most people would be willing to sit there across from him in a comfortable chair and listen to his stories for hours. When one of the most popular videos that I did with him was the one where he goes through the pottery shard pile in his backyard, and he just pulls out pieces and he talks about them, and he tells you a little bit about pottery and the way they were made and the way they were used and the differences between this, that, and the other thing. And I mean, these are really, to anybody, they're just broken pieces of pottery, but to him, it's a whole history of civilization going on there, and he can share so much that most of us don't even think about those pieces of pottery. It's just fascinating to listen to him talk and to watch him touch them because he really cares about them. His fingers feel the stories that are inside those pieces of pottery. And he said to me, when I look at this piece of pottery, I don't think about the pottery. I think about the person and the hands that belong to that person that made this. And I think that's absolutely true about him. He really thinks a great deal about the people who lived before us and the things they made and the things they touched, and they take on a whole life to him.
So you may have already said this, but to you, what's the most intriguing part of this treasure hunt?
For me, of course, it's looking for the treasure. I enjoy getting out in the mountains and looking around, and I enjoy that much more now than I did when I was younger, for some reason, and I can't explain that. When I was younger, I had other things to do, I guess, that intrigued me more. But right now, for me, this is the perfect opportunity for me to get out and explore and try to put the pieces of that poem puzzle together. It's a mental game. It's a physical game, although I don't expect it to be a terribly physical game. It still gets me out and looking. I enjoy driving down these mountain rural roads in Essie and trying to figure out what Forrest meant by this, that, and the other thing. I spend my winters by trying to put the puzzle of the poem together, the pieces together, to get a complete picture of where to look next. I like the whole thing. To me, it's just fascinating. But trying to understand what Forrest meant is the driving force and the most fascinating thing. And getting out there and trying to test what my ideas might be is just a lot of fun for me.
So what new characteristic about yourself have you learned since beginning the search?
Oh, that's interesting. I think I've learned. I don't know that I've learned any new characteristic, but I have picked up some skills that I didn't have before that I'm quite proud of, actually, because I think this is an improvement on my character and personality, and that's been some things that I've learned through keeping the blog, and that is to try and I've become a more caring and concerned person. I think in the past, I had my way of thinking, and if you didn't agree with me, well, that's okay. You were allowed to, but I didn't want to have much to do with you. I was ready to move on. Nowadays, I take a whole different approach. If someone disagrees with me or has a whole different idea, I listen very closely to what that is, and I respect that opinion much more than I used to, and I try to figure out if there's any way I can use that idea, or I can change my own ideas so that they fit into that person's concept. and I appreciate much more other people's ideas. I think that comes from being an isolationist for so long. I tend to not be a communal person, and the blog has thrown me into being a communal person, and I've picked up some skills and traits about listening to others that I never had before, and I greatly appreciate the fact that the blog has forced me to do that.
Well, that really is an experiential change when you say you've gone from being an isolationist to a communal person. That's a pretty big jump.
It is for me. I'm 65, and as far as I know, I've spent at least 55 of those years trying to get away from people. So,
Mm-hmm.
so this is a big change for me, but I'm enjoying the heck out of it. It's not like I had to force it. I mean, the opportunity was presented to me by the people, by the other searchers, and I've embraced it, and I like it, and I really do enjoy the searchers. They're a lot of fun.
So, what do you plan to do with the treasure if you actually find it?
What do you mean if?
What do you plan to do with the treasure when you find it?
I used to have big plans. I can remember the very first time that I went out to look, and I can hear myself in other people who are looking for the first time and who express themselves on the blog. They know exactly where it's at. The rest of us must be fools for having not thought of this.
Mm-hmm.
And they're absolutely sure where it is, and they're headed out there, and they're trying to tell us without telling us. They're trying to tell us, where they're headed, and how silly we are. But they don't want to give away too much for fear we'll run out there and snatch it out from under them. And I'll tell you, when the first time I was driving down to New Mexico, my first thought of where it was on in the box. Over there in the Rio Grande.
Mm-hmm.
And I was driving down, and I had never been to that area in my life, and I was headed out there. It's a 1,600-mile drive for me, and I was absolutely sure that was where it at. Everything made sense to me, and the whole drive down, my head was thinking about how I was going to spend this money and how I was going to get this fixed on the house and get that taken care of, and gee, maybe I'd be able to afford to have somebody else cut my grass so I wouldn't have to. Wouldn't that be great? All this stuff was running through my head, and I was at a loss when I didn't find it. People go through that on the forums and in various blogs.
Mm-hmm.
People
Yeah.
make comments, and you never saw their name before, and all of a sudden they show up on the blog, and they're
Mm-hmm.
talking, giving little hints about, I know, I'm pretty sure I know where it's at, and then that changes to I know where it's at, and then that changes to how come you guys must be really stupid? You haven't figured this out. and everybody is kind of sitting back and they're watching this person, and 99% of them believes that it's just because they're brand new and we've all been there, but 1% says, geez, I wonder if they really know.
Right.
You're always, you're not willing to commit completely to the idea that this person is just a newbie and doesn't know. There's always part of you that says, God, I hope they haven't really figured it out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Followed by the typing of the question to the newbie. So where are you thinking of going?
Yeah, right, exactly. Just oh, that place. Okay. Oh, I've been there. All right, I know that.
I'm safe. Yeah, I'm good. So in which state do you think Forrest hid the treasure, and why?
Well, I'm pretty sure that it's either in New Mexico, Colorado, Wyoming, or Montana, but I'm not absolutely sure. I've changed. I've embraced at one time or another in the 3 years that I've been looking. I've embraced every one of the 4 states,
Mm-hmm.
and a couple that are no longer possibilities.
Mm-hmm.
My latest belief is that it's in Montana, and I'm kind of sticking with that for a while. And I go back and forth, and that's this week because before spring comes, I may change my mind again. It's very likely. I think I have ideas now. Right as we're talking, I have this great plan about where I think it is, and this is not a new idea for me. This place I'm thinking about is a place I have more or less been in, at least in that region, in the past. but there is specific areas within that region that I have not looked. And when I say region, I'm talking about maybe a 10 by 10 square mile area that I've looked in many times before, but without success, and given up on, and went somewhere else. And now I'm considering going back to that region again because mostly because of what other people say, and I know that's a dangerous situation. But the reasons I think I originally went there, and they seem to ring true again as I hear other people restate why those ideas are good for them. And I'm thinking, those are good reasons. And I never thought about that particular reason, but there's another reason that seems like a good idea. So I think I'm as soon as the snow melt, I think I'm headed back to Montana. Probably early June to look in that spot again.
Mm-hmm. I know there's a lot of people that believe that as well, with some very convincing arguments. It was interesting to me that when I first started, I, being the logical person that I am, I sat down and wrote all the reasons why I thought it was in New Mexico and not in someplace else. And what's funny about this process, of course, is if you write it down enough, you start absolutely believing it.
Sure.
Without any sense that there are alternatives. And the advantage, I think, of looking at your blog and Stephanie's forum and Mike's blog is that you look at it and people have written just as interesting and realistic positions on why they believe it's in Colorado or Wyoming or Montana as I have in New Mexico. And I think it does. I think it stimulates additional thinking on my part, and it sounds like it stimulates additional thinking on your part.
So you're a believer in New Mexico?
I want to say that I'm a believer, but I think either fortunately or unfortunately, I'm convinced. I have the conviction of New Mexico, and that might hurt me in the long run, but I've written several position pieces that ended up on my blog that explain why I believe it's in New Mexico, and they're pretty strong. But as I said, I've seen just as strongly written position papers as why it's another state, and I'm sure that if you and I were sitting at a bar with a couple of beers in our hands, you could probably convince me that it was someplace other than New Mexico, and I'd probably have to eat my blog post.
Well, we ought to try that someday.
I look forward to the opportunity. So how do you think, this has always been a topic of great discussion, and when I interviewed Rennell last week, she had a great response to it. How do you think that Forrest will know when the treasure has been discovered, if he does?
I don't believe there's any trickery. I don't believe that there's any magic technology involved. I think Forrest is going to know in a couple of ways when that treasure is found. First of all, I believe that Forrest is so close to the pieces inside that chest that he's going to know. He's going to understand mentally, spiritually, when it's in somebody else's hands, to begin with. I also feel that he is so confident about where he's hidden it, and it is so difficult to locate, even if you're in the right area, that he has confidence that no one has found it. I don't think there's any trickery involved. I've listened to all of that stuff. I don't believe Forrest bothered to employ any of that. I just feel he has a strong connection to it, and he will know when it has been gathered up by somebody else. And I also believe pretty strongly in the idea that I don't see how anybody could possibly locate this thing and not contact Forrest. I just don't see how that's possible.
If nothing else, to return the turquoise and silver bracelet.
Well, if they know enough about the blog, we're talking about Forrest has said nobody will ever stumble on it, and I doubt that. I think someday. Look at his bells and his jars, which he's burying 3 feet deep, and has no intention of anybody ever going out and looking for them and finding them. He's said himself, I couldn't go back to some of those. I don't remember exactly where I put them. His intention is not that they be found, except maybe 1,000 years from now, somebody's putting up a house and has an excavator out in some place we never thought anybody would ever build anything, and somebody's out there digging, and they'll dig up one of these things, and they'll say, well, what is this about? I think it's the same kind of thing. I think somebody could stumble, eventually on Forrest's treasure if it isn't found. I don't believe it's impossible to stumble on. I think that if we don't find it in the next couple of years, interest may or may not wane. Have you seen the movie? Have you seen the movie Stand Up Guys? There's a great line in there. I think Al Pacino says it. He said, we die twice. We die when we take our last breath, and we die once more when the last person we know speaks our name. And when he said that, I thought immediately of Forrest. And I think that's one of the things that Forrest thinks about. And when I'm 83 years old, I'll probably start thinking about that too. When am I forgotten? And I think that that's part of what this is all about. Part of this is fun for Forrest, a great deal of fun for him, and he enjoys it. But I think part of it also is in mortality. He writes about that in his first book, life. Who are we? When are we forgotten? And what mark do we make in this world? And how important is it for us for someone to say our name long after we're dead? And I think that that's part of what this whole treasure hunt is about. So people will speak his name long into the future.
So what's the best advice you can give to someone else who's planning to get into the treasure hunt?
Don't listen to anything that I say. I've been out there for 3 years and I haven't figured it out. So, obviously I'm a complete waste of time. You need to listen to somebody brighter than me about where this thing might be located. But, really and truly, after you get over that initial, I know where it is, oops, I guess I don't know where it is, phase, don't give up, because looking for it is a tremendous amount of fun and very, very rewarding. And I know not everybody can do that. I know not everybody has the resources to be able to go out and do that. And I feel bad for the folks who are on the blog who wish they could go out and look but can't. And some people are just perfectly happy spending their time trying to solve the puzzle in their minds and offer whatever help they can to other folks who may be closer to the location of the treasure and can give them a hand and go out and look. But I feel pretty bad for the folks who wish they could go out but just don't have the resources to be able to do that. But really and truly, if you do have the resources to go out and look, to experience the mountains, to experience the West, and to experience treasure hunting, and to experience getting out and climbing around and looking and spending time with your family and kids in that way, if you have an opportunity to do that, by all means use the treasure as the reason to go out and do it, because kids love a treasure hunt, and even if you don't find it, it's a great deal of fun out there.
Well, Dale, let's make a promise that if we ever find one another in our respective territories, that we get together for that beer and some conversation. I look forward to it. And as a matter of fact, if we ever find ourselves in a common territory, let's make sure we take the time to visit with one another.
Well, as you wander north and I wander south, we're bound to probably end up in 3 or 4 years somewhere in the middle of Colorado, I guess.
I'd like to think so. Dale, this was a great interview. Thank you for joining our podcast today. I'm sure our listeners have found the conversation interesting and informative, and good luck in your search.
Well, thank you very much, and I sure do appreciate you asking me.
My pleasure. Well, listeners, that wraps up this episode. Join us next week for another podcast from A Gypsy's Kiss. And remember, for the latest in the search for Fenn's treasure, visit our blog at agypsieskiss.com. Until the next time, this is Toby Eunice for A Gypsy's Kiss, signing off.